This is the curve that forever changed how I think about producing and mixing my songs. Hello nerds, my name is Virtual Riot, and today I'm here to share some secret production sauce with you, or not so secret if you've heard about it before. Also, I got a new microphone because I've seen some comments about the mic sound being a little bit too... So I hope that this is better. So this curve is called the Fletcher-Munson curve, or the equal loudness contour. The Fletcher-Munson curve is in blue, the equal loudness in red, but they are basically the same. I think the equal loudness curve is an updated version. And basically these tell you that your ears are more sensitive to certain frequencies than to others. The further down this curve goes, the more sensitive you are to a certain frequency range, and if it goes up, it means you're less sensitive. And basically this means, like, if you had white noise, just pure white noise that is playing every frequency at once at the same amplitude, which we could pull up in Serum really quickly over here. And this analyzer and this EQ is telling us that we've got an equal amount of every frequency. It does, like, subjectively to you, sound kind of bright. Like, where's all the low end and the rumble? If it was every frequency at the same amplitude, subjectively, I would expect a lot more low end. Which is why we came up with these variations of white noise called pink noise and brown noise. Those are nothing different than just the white noise with a tilt EQ, something like this, put on top of it, so that it sounds a little more even out to our human ears. So that makes sense when you think about it. Our ears are shaped a certain way, maybe to amplify certain frequencies, and you might be wondering why. And the answer is evolution. Because during monkey or caveman times, your chance of survival was higher if you were able to hear, let's say, a snapping twig in the woods when a predator was trying to creep up on you. Or you needed to be able to hear the scream of a baby to come for help to ensure the survival of your species. And I think that's why the most sensitive areas in this curves are like between 500 and 1000 hertz, and then again between 3 and 5 kilohertz, because that's sort of where the human speech kind of sits for the most part. And we are very much not sensitive to sub-bass, so we can take a lot of boost of bass before it's starting to like hurt our ears. The most sensitive area here is definitely between 3 and 5 kilohertz. And then this also changes ever so slightly if the input volume gets louder and louder. So you can sort of think about this red line here as the EQ you would have to put on white noise to make it sound even to you. Or most people. Obviously all our ears are different, everyone's going to have a slightly different ear shape, so your personal curve might be slightly different, but this is a good average. And I've sort of been using this curve as a bit of a reference or a guide to when I EQ things. Usually not as like an exact EQ curve that I will model after this, though I've done this in Ableton, you can play around with the preset, I'll put it on my Patreon, but more to inform my mixing decisions. So my biggest takeaway from this curve has been that if something sounds a little too harsh, it's usually in the 2 to 4 kilohertz area, and if something sounds a little too muddy, it's usually in the 500 hertz area, maybe a little lower, maybe a little higher, but those are the two areas that I look for the most when I'm EQing something. Here's an example where I've made a little supersaw. And I've tried to sort of recreate the Fletcher-Munson curve a little bit here without boosting anything aggressively, because usually when I EQ something, I'll try to do subtractive EQing rather than like boosting certain areas. That's just like a general mixdown advice, but also everything I'm saying here that's like advice and you should do this is not 100% right all the time. You will find examples, there'll be moments, there'll be songs that might do the exact opposite and it worked. So take all of this with a grain of salt. This is just something that I found very helpful to me personally when I'm producing. So here's this supersaw before and after. If I turn this up more, it starts to get a little phasey. But maybe I'd put something like to this degree on it, and maybe just for the highs, like this area is like, this isn't doing a lot. And I wouldn't just do this for synth sounds, I do this for basses as well. Like if this guy sounded a little bit too harsh, it's probably something up here. And a little bit of mud removal. For me personally, that's usually more between the 200 and 400 hertz range. But you would be surprised how many EQs that I make kind of look like this. Even on the master, sometimes, if the entire track needs a little less harshness, I'll have like a slight adjustment like this on there. And that 2 to 4 kilohertz range is the most important to me personally, because that's sort of where it'll start hurting your ears first when you turn a song up louder and louder. Like it's gonna take sub a long time to actually hurt your eardrums before like 3-4 kilohertz is going to cause some damage to your ears. Which kind of makes sense because your eardrums are pretty tiny and they're not going to pick up sub-frequencies as much as they're going to react to higher frequencies. This is all slight speculation, by the way. I'm just sort of going off of what logically makes sense here for me. I looked this up a while ago and this is just from memory. But it kind of makes sense, right? And lastly, this might explain why the multiband compression on my mastering setup kind of looks the way it does. Because what I do is I compress the sub area, like everything at 110 Hz and below, quite a lot with an 8:1 ratio, and then everything above 6 or 7 kHz with another pretty high ratio of 7:1. Because when I'm looking at this curve, what this is telling me as well is that human ears are more sensitive and will much quicker recognize a change in volume in these areas rather than in like the sub or the very high frequencies. Like a difference of, let's say, 2 decibels, louder or quieter, you might notice a lot more around 3 to 5 kilohertz or 500, 600, 700 hertz than in the sub range. That tells me that I can compress those areas where we don't perceive a change in amplitude that much a little higher without losing the feeling of dynamics, and the areas that we're more sensitive to, we might perceive changes in volume a lot more, so I don't want to compress those too much. So this way I kind of have it sound still fluffy, while especially the sub that takes up a lot of energy is kind of like slammed into a strong compression, so it doesn't like break out and creates clipping for me. I mean, I'm clipping in the end anyway, but you get what I mean. So ultimately, I'm not using an exact Fletcher-Munson curve in my project. I just reference this curve a lot when I'm doing my mixing decisions. And last but not least, you can sort of build yourself your own little mini soothe, and I just wanted to show you that real quick. So I kind of want to have an EQ that dynamically ducks this harsh range depending on how much input volume is coming in. So we could just grab an envelope follower, and now that's reacting to the input sound. And then before that, I'm gonna put an EQ with 2 really harsh cutoffs, like a really harsh low cut and high cut on like the ×4 setting. I'm gonna put you between 2 and 5 kilohertz, somewhere around here. So now this envelope follower is only reacting to the ouch area of the incoming signal. So I'm gonna set this to 50 and this to 0 and map it to the gain over here. And now it is ducking that area depending on how loud the frequencies are. But obviously we want this to happen to our clean signal. So we can just put these 2 into a rack and create a parallel chain that just lets the dry audio through, and then turn this one off. Now we have like a dynamic harshness reduction, and we could add some macros if we wanted to, like attach the gain to a macro, maybe the rise and fall for like attack and release, and maybe the EQ strength, like the overall scale, or the Q of that point, for some better control over it. But that way you've kind of built yourself a little dynamically responding EQ. That's everything for today. You can download the EQ Fletcher-Munson curve and that dynamic harshness reduction rec from the link in the description on my Patreon. It's for free. You just have to become a free member and then you can download it. You just have to make sure you have Ableton 12.3, like the latest version. All right, everybody have a nice day. See you soon. Bye-bye.